Hello. Last time we were talking about trying to pick which ticks to target. And that's sort of the first step that we'd really want to take when attempting to treat or address ticks. Now, the next thing I'd like to look at is the circumstances that may contribute to or affect ticks. Ticks are not caused by situations. They are not caused by what people around you do, per se. There is a class of ticks that tend to respond very much to what other people are doing, but those are what we call Echopraxia or echolalia, which are simply repeating what you hear or see other people do. Also, I feel it helpful to point out that echolalia and Echopraxia both can be ticks. They can be other things than ticks as well. So that's not to say that they are always ticks. Now, back to the original point, the situations that you might find yourself in can contribute to the occurrence of ticks, but they do not themselves cause ticks. So ticks are more likely to occur in certain situations, certain activities, or certain stress levels, because the things that are going on around us affect how we feel inside. They affect our body and our brain. So we might feel more stressed out, for example, in some situations than others, and that stress level can feed into or affect your ticks. There's also a curious thing that we tend to observe with ticks, which is that if we look at, imagine a sort of inverted curve. Let me draw one here really quick. So if we have an inverted curve like this, then we'd see that when stress levels are very low over here, ticks tend to be high. And when stress levels are very high, like over here, ticks also tend to be high. Kind of somewhere in the middle, they often seem to reduce. Especially when it's an activity that your mind can get really focused on. So many people have the experience that when they are sort of in the zone, so to speak, that might be like playing a musical instrument or playing a sport or any number of things where they kind of are able to focus their mind, ticks seem to diminish. That doesn't mean that they're being faked. It just means that ticks tend to respond to this engagement from the brain. On the other hand, we expect ticks tend to be high when we're under a lot of stress. That doesn't really tend to surprise people, but it also seems to happen when ticks or when stress levels are very low, that ticks tend to be high. So like after a long day, you might come home, sit down on the couch, watch some TV. That might be after work or after school. But while relaxing, ticks might go up. They may become more frequent or more severe, or certain ticks that didn't happen earlier in the day tend to show up in those times. So we want to be able to take a little bit of time to understand what situations seem to be connected to ticks. It doesn't mean that we're going to say, well, you should always avoid that situation, because that would not be very helpful or practical. The goal is really for you to be able to live your life in the way that you wish to and to engage in meaningful activities. That means that you don't want to be cutting things out necessarily because of ticks, but you do want to have an understanding that ticks are more likely in these types of situations, so you can expect them, so it's not so surprising or as stressful when they happen to show up. And also so that when you start developing your exercises, you might get more practice during those times, because you know that that's when the ticks are likely to happen. So here's sort of the next step to do. After you've already picked which tick you're going to target, the next thing you want to do is start trying to collect information about when it happens more, or when the urge to do the tick happens more. So you can start by looking at like different times of the day. Does it happen more when I first wake up? Does it happen more after or during different meal times? Does it happen more often with certain types of activities? Like, oh, well, when I go into this class or when I go into this meeting, my tics happen a lot more. Okay, that's good to know. It doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It's just you want to understand when it happens more often and be able to look at it as like, oh, okay, so yeah, I'm beginning to understand my tics a little bit more. So that's the next step for the moment, is to start looking at the situations, the times, and the people around which your tics happen more often.